And there's an even more profound danger. I've talked about this guy by name, and I don't think I bothered to formally introduce him. Isn't he a cutie? This is Edward Alexander Crowley, also known as Aleister Crowley. He styled himself the wickedest man in the world. He believed himself to be the great beast, and he changed his name to Aleister Crowley so it would add up in both English, Hebrew, and Greek Kabbalah as 666. In 1904, Crowley had a communication with an extraterrestrial being named Iwas. And this being, through his wife, kind of a channeling type operation, brought forth a book that was called the Book of the Law in 1904. And this book declared that the slain and risen God, i.e. Jesus, had stepped off the throne, and that a new God, the crowned and conquering child, was taking his place. And as a result of this, Crowley proclaimed the end of Christianity and the start of Crowleyanity. Obviously, the guy had no self-esteem problems. In fact, he was a brilliant genius. He could play 8 chess games blindfolded. He was an accomplished poet, mountaineer, painter, writer. He had so many Masonic degrees that you could fill up 5 pages of a book with them. This guy was probably the most highly honored Mason in the world. And he was also the most dangerous man of the 20th century. And he began doing rituals to bring forth this crowned and conquering child. And he began to start what he called the cult of the fascinating child. And in doing this, he uncovered, without knowing it, the royal secret of Masonry. And what happened was, a gentleman came knocking at his door after he published a book. And in this book, it was a book of poetry, and in the book he had made an allusion to something. And this guy, his name was Theodore Royce. He was a German occultist and the head of the OTO, the Ordo Templi Orientis, which stands for the Order of Eastern Templars. There's the Knights Templar again. And this Theodore Royce told Crowley that he had given away the greatest secret in occult history. And Crowley said, "What do you mean? I don't even understand it." So the guy promptly initiated him on the spot to the 9th degree of the OTO and then explained the secret to him. And you're about to learn what this secret is. The secret is that as a Mason, you are promised immortality. If you go to a Masonic funeral, you will hear them discuss the immortality issue. You will hear them promise that they will go to the celestial lodge above and live there forever. How do they get this immortality? They don't believe in Jesus. The name of Jesus is not allowed to be mentioned in the Blue Lodge of Freemasonry. And while there are probably many Masons in this nation that are either nominal or even professing Christians, that doesn't enter into this discussion because it's not mentioned in the funeral. Where do they get their promise of immortality? Simply, the secret that Crowley uncovered, probably through demonic intervention, is the secret that this immortality is conveyed through tantric sex magic. And the kind of sex magic that we're talking about here, unfortunately, is a sexual violation of a little child. Crowley taught that the way you could live forever was by vampirizing little children sexually. And he personally bragged of having slaughtered 150 male children in 1 year. This is why he was called the wickedest man in the world. And this, I apologize that this is so horrible, but Masons are doing this. Not all Masons, please understand me. Probably 1 in 100 knows about this. But this is a significant enough problem that I feel compelled to share it with you. In our ministry, with one accord, we have had to pray for literally hundreds of people who are the relatives of Masons. Either children, grandchildren, nephews, nieces, whatever, and they have been sexually violated by their Masonic relatives, often in Masonic temples. This is why the Masons believe that they will live forever. They think every time they defile a little child, they steal some of that child's youth. And if you notice, children that are sexually abused do age more rapidly because their innocence has been stolen. What happens then is they believe that they are accessing alternate universes, alternate realities where they can become as gods. And I believe that this is why, because this man has been was doing these kind of rituals right up until his death in 1947, that we today have an epidemic of child abuse on our hands. Now, the final thing I have to share about this, and then we're going to be closing for the break, is the meaning of this. And this is a very mysterious symbol, which, you know, you've heard all sorts of explanations for it, but I'm going to give you the Masonic Illuminati inner meaning of what this means tonight. And it's going to probably gross you out and astonish you, and I apologize in advance for that. But this is what it means. Crowley reveals the secret behind the all-seeing eye symbol in one of his books, the Book of Thoth, which is a very advanced manual on tarot card readings. And this is the eye of Lucifer. But believe it or not, it corresponds to a human organ that, for lack of a more delicate term, we'll call the rectum, which is kind of ironic when you think about it, that this represents Lucifer. And what this refers to is that the occult archaeometric doctrine of Masonry is that by accessing alternate universes through sodomy, especially of young boys, you can access alternate dimensions of reality through what are called the tunnels of Typhon. Now, you remember I showed you earlier a map of the Tree of Life. Well, everything in magic, like everything in the occult, has its yin and yang. It's positive and it's negative, it's good and evil. There's always this dynamism. And so therefore, just like there is a tree of life, there is also a tree of evil. This is called the Qliphote in Hebrew, which translated means harlots. And you'll notice here that all of the names are all evil. And these Typhonian tunnels are the paths between these 10 evil worlds. Now, if you want a little bit more on this than I have time to get into right now, you can read the book Lucifer Dethroned, because it does go into it. But here is what is ultimately involved. There is a belief that through this sexual perversion, they can access these tunnels into alternate universes, alternate realities. And the goal of this kind of magic is to find your own universe and become the god over that universe. This buys into the modern day physics theory that there's many, many dimensions of reality. Maybe you've read about that. Alternate universes. It shows up in science fiction a lot. And then once you're the god of this universe, you can start sucking the energy out of it. And you can use that energy through this child to live forever and ever and ever. And there are men, I have met several that claim to be hundreds of years old. Now, of course, are they lying their lips off? I frankly think they are. This is a deception. Satan is deceiving these people to draw them into all kinds of profound evil. But the important point is not, does this really work? The important point is, do these people believe it? And sadly, they do. And this broad genre of magic is called, and here's a nice big word for you, Transjuguthian magic. And all that means is it's magic that goes into trans-Plutonian space. Space beyond the planet Pluto, which they believe is beyond the pale of the sun and therefore beyond the pale of the Judeo-Christian God. They believe there are gods out beyond Pluto that are far more powerful and far more dangerous and far more deadly than either God or the devil. And that's what these beings, these men, are trying to access. Now, please understand me. I can't say this strongly enough. Only probably 1 or 2 out of 100 Masons is doing this. But that's more than we need. Amen? I mean, this is such a problem that we are actually, I now know of 5 national support groups that are helping people that are survivors of Masonic ritual abuse. This is that serious a problem. And let me tell you something else. The other 95, 96, 97 Masons have an even bigger problem, because the spiritual headship over their organization trickles back down to this monster, And because of that, even if they're good men, even if they don't know about this, you know what happens? They begin to struggle, even if they're Christians, with profound temptations to move in this area of pedophilia and homosexuality. And this is dangerous stuff. I mean, this is spreading throughout the world like a plague. We have organizations like NAMBLA, the National Association of Man-Boy Love, which their slogan is sex before 8 or it's too late. And they're trying to lower the age of consent to 8 years old. And all of this can be laid at the door of this occult monstrosity. Now here's the issue. Just like, you know, we have a saying in the state where I come from. You lie down with dogs, you get up with fleas, amen? If you're a Mason and you're in an organization with this kind of spiritual headship, this is all around you and you don't even know it. It's like a fish swimming in polluted water that's full of spiritual sewage. And you can't help but take this into yourself. And even if you're a Christian, this is going to have an impact on you. Even if you are, I mean, even in my case, and I wasn't a Christian at this time by any extent of the imagination, but it's important to understand that in all of this, that I myself, as a normal, red-blooded heterosexual, was finding myself continually drawn into sexual thoughts and sexual fantasies about little boys. I thank God I never acted on any of that. But it was being forced on me because I was under the umbrella of the Masonic leadership. And it is really a very tragic thing, but it is very real, this kind of headship. So the bottom line here is that you cannot be a part of this and be a follower of Jesus Christ. I heard another brother say it this way: you cannot at the same time be an intelligent Mason and an intelligent Christian. It's that simple. Now, people ask me, what's the big deal about all of this? And I'm going to end this with something a little bit more uplifting, because I know that probably just made the living daylights out of everybody. This is a very important symbol in Masonry and in Satanism. It's called a trapezoid. Doesn't it bother you a little? Doesn't it look unfinished somehow? That's the idea. In architecture, this is called a frustrum because it frustrates people. And this is believed by Masons who understand this stuff to be the ideal shape for manifesting demons. That's why Masonic altars are all built in a trapezoidal shape. That's why haunted houses often have roofs that are called mansard roofs. It seems to attract more demon spirits. Now here's the deal. You put this on top of this, and you've got the thing that's back on the dollar bill. But notice something. Let's go back to the original symbol. Why is this incomplete? What does that mean? Nothing in this thing is there by accident. Nothing in this symbol is there by accident. This is incomplete because the capstone is missing. What did Jesus Christ say in Matthew 21? He says, did you never read in the scriptures, the stone which the builders rejected, the same has become the head of the corner. Now I ask you, what is the head? What stone can be a headstone and a cornerstone at the same time? The top of a pyramid. And Jesus Christ is the capstone of this pyramid, because it is an expression ultimately of the Trinity. That's why this is in the way. Satan thinks by putting his little idol here, he can keep Jesus Christ from descending to the earth and assuming his rightful place as the top of the pyramid. And there's a lot of interesting stuff here. In the next couple of verses, he says, in verse 44 of Matthew 21, he says, whosoever shall fall upon this stone shall be broken, but on whomsoever it shall fall, it will grind him to a powder. Now what does that mean? Well, think about it. If you have a stone that's shaped like a pyramid, if you fall on it, you're going to break like that. If it falls on you, it's going to crush you to a powder. And I submit to you that what that is an image, a biblical typology of the first and second coming. Because the first time Jesus came that we might fall on him and be saved and be broken like we talked about earlier. The second time he's coming, if you aren't a member of his body, bam, you're going to be ground into the dust. No more Mr. Nice Guy, in other words. And that's what this symbol is, and that's why Satan is so desperate to keep this as his symbol, is because he does not want this pyramid completed. But we know that no matter what Satan does, it is going to be completed, because nothing can stay the hand of God. And that second advent, I believe, is very, very, very close. And on that note, I'm going to bring it to a close for this portion. Thank you very much.
Please keep your seat. Let me have some volume here. Thank you.
What's up? Soldier Arts here. Today we'll be diving into one of the most spiritually aligning, enlightening subjects I've done, and I really hope you can enjoy and keep up with it. Today we'll just be talking about 100 years of conscious spiritual / occult truths, and the overall title for this is The Revolution of Spirituality and how it actually takes place over time. You see, we have been told that simply because we're on the brink of a new age, that all these spiritual changes and all these growths are actually what's making all the change in the world happen. But I must disagree, and if you keep up with me, you know that I disagree with that. And you know I know the truth about what's actually going on in the New Age movement and most of the spiritual movement and the spiritual movements in the world right now. I know the origin of them. So I just figured today it's very important for me to share that with you, because I don't want you to get caught up in a bunch of mumbo jumbo, you know. So first of all, we have to go over this, that all spiritual truths that you think are universal truths, they all go back to a spiritual movement that happened at least 100 to 150 years before you were born. And that is the ones that are on the forefront in your culture at this time. For example, in today's time, we have a lot of demonology and a lot of quote unquote devil worship. Now, the origin of this title called devil worship is not really accurate for what these people are actually doing. But this spiritual movement of devil worship was started around a time in which people actually believed that that's what they were doing. As time went on, these spiritual practices and these spiritual rituals, they actually started working the way that they were supposed to, and they were not intended to, but energetically supposed to work on the people who they were supposed to work on. And if you look up magic and you look up spirituality, then you know that that's how that actually works, that you are really invoking energies inside of yourself when you are summoning energies, whether it be God, devil, Jesus, fucking Santa Claus, or fucking Shiva, or anything you want to call upon. These are all energies that you're evoking into yourself and allowing them to channel their energy through your body. Okay, now that I've just blurred all the information in your face, let me go to this chart to actually be 100% frank on what I'm talking about. Okay, you see, I have this timeline right here. Now, soul jobs, we don't believe in timelines, but we do believe in energetic movement patterns. Anyway, I'm going to stick to the timeline with this. In 1850, you had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 key spiritual movements that were tearing apart what people believed to be the truth at that point in time, spiritually and physically. Okay. Now I'm going to name the people who are known to have started these movements and go a little bit into depth on why what was started all the way back here and what is the spiritual movements that happened in the 1850s through the 1900s are now 100 or so years later affecting us, it being sold to us as 100% truth, when even back then these were seen as experimental spiritual systems. Okay, we're going to start with Phineas Quimby, and he's one of the very key people. He was a philosopher back in the 1830s through the 1850s. He brought up something called the New Thought movement. The New Thought movement was actually originally published and spread through the newspapers and stuff back then by people who are in the secret society known as the Assassins. And over time, if you do research on secret people who write books for secret societies, then you could start gaining spiritual atonement and start making your own spiritual system, because these are just historical recordings that people are aligning together to make spiritual systems. And this is one of the first people who could actually who actually came out in the open, were open to saying these things. And then you got people like, you have to look these people up. You have somebody named Allan Kardec. Allan Kardec made up the spiritual system called Spiritism. And this was actually one of the first international New Age spiritual systems that ever was existed. It took away all of the religious aspects and the dogma, and it put a little bit of Gnostic knowledge in there, but also it set boundaries and disciplines for the followers of the spirituality to keep themselves in check. Now, by no way am I saying that any of these things are perfect. Remember, what I'm trying to get you to see is that these spiritual systems that were just being experimenting on 100 years ago. It doesn't go back to prehistorical times. It doesn't go back to all the ancestors and shit like that like they tell you. It literally only goes back from where you at, which is almost 2020, which is almost going to be in effect where these spiritual systems are going to be popular, and these spiritual experimentations will be at the forefront the same way that these were doing between the time of 2000 and 2020. You see, if you go back and do research to the 2000s and a little bit before when the 2000s started, you'll see that the people like Rudolf Steiner, who started something called anthroposophy, a very interesting spiritual system indeed. You have to do some type of research on Rudolf Steiner. And then you want to look at somebody named Helena Blavatsky. Now, this is one of the most popular ones that the occultists like to share with people, because she was very dedicated to her goals, that she was sent out to the world to explore different spiritual systems throughout the East and the West. Now, in today's world, they call this euphemism. Okay, this is when you mix together the religions or the spiritual systems of the East with the religious systems of the West, without any dogma and with pure Gnostic outlook. And you take those outlooks and you turn it into yourself in order to basically be the person who you want to be. This is called Theosophy, and it was made by Helena Blavatsky. She has some of the most extensive work that you could do on most of the spiritual practices that you learned from the 2000s to the 2020s. Now, what you have to understand, that all these people right here are a part of secret societies. None of them have your interest at hand. None of them, not one of them. Not even the people over here we're about to go to in the next line. But none of these people had their well-being at heart. What they really were interested in is just purely finding out the truth. And that has nothing to do with emotions or nothing to do with life at all, to be honest. I mean, it has a lot to do with life, but it doesn't guarantee your safety in life. Now we're going to go to these next persons like Aleister Crowley. Aleister Crowley has gotten a lot of hype from the rap community, and Aleister Crowley has gotten a lot of hype from the entertainment business because a lot of his theosophies are used in order to basically mind fuck people who just got out of religion and put them into this do what you will type mind state, which is basically what the people who are on top of these secret societies that sent all of these separate people out, they want you to feel like you are actually doing what you want to do. And what Aleister Crowley did, he was a very he said he came across somebody named Ayahuasca, and Ayahuasca is this he goes back to this ancestral energy that goes back to Egypt, and and you feel me, that's where all of this spiritual channeling of your ancestors and shit come from. It originates not all the way going back to before Christ and Egyptian times. It all originated with this guy Aleister Crowley with his spiritual system called Thelma. Now, by the end of this line, you're going to have what is called the New Age movement, because all the New Age movement is, and what I'm showing you in this video right now, is that literally the agenda, I'm showing you the literal agenda that these people are using in order to brainwash you. You see, what happens is they take these first three people especially, and they start printing their books, and they send it out to the middle class American cultures and bookstores. And these people who are not necessarily held down by religious beliefs because of their political agendas, they don't have to be politically Christian because they have money, more money than poor people. So what happens is these middle class people start reading these people's books, people who are experimenting with spirituality and magic and stuff like that. And this fascinated the middle class. And what they started doing was, basically, after these people passed away, they started looking into these three people's research more and more and more. And what they found out is that these people's research actually has a physical effect on people, and they have a spiritual effect on people, a very strong one. And it breaks down all of the illusions that are associated with Christianity for you, basically, and allows you to feel like you're in this free state in which they call the mystic state, a mystical experience. Now, we're going to go down to the next ones. You got somebody in here named who, I'm just going to go into it. His name is John Gon. He made up something called the Reme movement. The Reme movement is, if I'm not mistaken, it's a Middle European movement, and it had nothing to do with your well-being either. Now, I can't really remember the exacts of John Gon, but I do know this Reme movement was one of the most positive ones on this whole list. Now we're going to look up a guy named John Balu Nubra, and he made up what's called faithism. Faithism is basically going along with Aleister Crowley's movement of do what you will. But what the difference is with faithism is that it is purely ran by a hierarchy of like religious figures. They go into Christianity, they go into Muslims, it goes into a lot of euphemism, mixing together the Eastern and Western cultures. It goes into a lot of that, but I wouldn't say that it tops these first three because they don't really provide the information. And it was a very short movement that did what it needed to do, and it was allowed to happen by the bankers of that time, basically. What we have next is Wovoka. Now, I put this on here because you're always going to have one spiritual system that is combating the rest of them, which is the actual truth, and it's a very practical one that everybody can use. These first couple ones, you have to go through stuff and need to be reversed to even need these or call upon these. They are not universal. But the Wovoka, and what he made up was something called the ghost dance, or he reinvented the ghost dance and modernized it for his time. And he lived between 1856 and 1932. You have to do research on Wovoka, because a lot of the music of popular music now, which is dance music, it originates from this theory that Wovoka made up. And that, I mean, it's not a theory, it's from this spiritual system that Wovoka made up in order to kick out all of the negative energies and actually heal yourself on a higher spiritual level. You can literally call in, evoke energies of healing upon you, turn on a certain frequency type of music and start dancing, or be in a circle of friends and start dancing and actually heal yourself from any disease and any problems, any mind state. And even to the point to where you can use that energy and control the weather if you have strong enough people or strong enough frequencies. This all originates from Wovoka. Very powerful. Okay, after that you got Guido von List. He lived from 1848 to 1919, and he made up Armenianism. Armenianism is a kind of racist type of spiritual system. It's very similar to what they tell you about not the KKK, but the people in Germany. What's their name? No, I'm talking about the blue eye, like the shit that, never mind. Anyway, yeah, they are racist. It's a very race-centered spiritual system, and it originated from the teachings of Helena Blavatsky. This is very key because she taught that there's a specific race, a group of people on the earth that were going to come back and they were going to change the world for the better, and they're going to bring that Christ energy into the world for people. And it's only going to be those group of people. And what he did, this Guivinolist guy who made up Armenianism, he basically toned this in, and he took the philosophies of Helena Blavatsky and he modernized it for his time in order to spread the very message without putting any type of negative annotation onto Helena's work also. Now, right here, you got Father Divine. He made up the International Peace Mission movement. Now, I did a little research on this. This was one of the movements that started in the 1870s and lasted all the way until the 1960s. So when I did the small research I did on this, because I couldn't find that much stuff on it, what I found was basically that this was a whole bunch of bullshit. And this was nothing but what the Jehovah's Witness does. Is what they take a religious sector, they strip it of all of the dogma and shit, and they basically make up new dogma that applies to them and make people respect them. Now, what this international peace movement is a front for peace in order to bring the New World Order into hands. And this is why this is the longest lasting movement out of all these movements. And even today, you can find churches of the International Peace Movement, even to this day. Next, you got Edgar Cayce. Edgar Cayce made up the Association for Research and Enlightenment. Now, this is one of the most modest ones on this list, but it's still focused on euphemism. And like I said, by the time you got to the end of this, for the spiritual systems between the 1850s and the 1900s, you would be able to see that if you go look up each one of these people who started or who pushed these spiritual movements, then you will see that in all, you have what is known as the New Age movement in its completion alone. The very fanatics of it were actually started in that between the 1850s and the 1900s. It does not go all the way back into ancestral times. We have to know this. And just because these people did research back then with less efficient technologies to actually do the research, and they put that research into their own spiritual breakdown and wrote a book about it, that does not mean that it's 100, that is true. Now, these spiritual systems do have an effect on people, but only in the way that you are being hypnotized. So look, let's go back over this. The spiritual systems, their self-names are, the New Age movement is made of anthroposophy, theosophy, the spiritual system of Thelma, the Reme movement, faithism, with dancing, the ghost dance, Armenianism, which is a racial divide and a manifest destiny based off of race, Father Divine with his international peace movement, which is a bunch of hippie bullshit that people don't even really understand. It is really do drugs. And last but not least, the Association for Research and Enlightenment. Okay, let me turn this back around to me. Hold on, y'all. Okay. All right. Now we went over that first half of the list pretty much. I want to go ahead and try to start summoning up what this video is about, or summoning up the video. What you will start to realize is that after the 1900s, you had a very major change in something called the Industrial Revolution, and a lot of breakthroughs in technologies and a lot of breakthroughs in the way that people communicated and interacted with each other has changed. You also have, as a fact, that the Federal Reserve Bank of America is established between the times of the 1900s and 1920s, and that has a great effect on what I'm about to say, because most of the people who run and actually most of the people who actually are the leaders of these spiritual movements, they are complete slaves to the bankers who they are doing the research for in the first place, and who is giving them the money to do the research studies on these subjects. So once you understand that, then you realize that in order to get to where we are with the New Age movement being the most dominant form of knowing in the United States, we literally had to take all the knowings from this place right here. They stuffed it underground and they kept it hidden in very small subcultures. And like I said, in the 1950s, where a lot of the research and a lot of the studies for these spiritual systems are stopped, and it's completely slowed down. This is because we are always on a cycle of knowing and unknowing, and it does not take as 2,100 years like they tell you with the spiritual age system. That is on a whole nother level of knowledge, and you don't even really understand that. You can go back and watch my video called The Age of Aquarius / the end of the Age of Pisces to even understand that. But the truth is basically that every 50 years, you come to a period in which the people, if they are held under a system, they will want to revolt and they want to cause a revolution. And every 50 years, the people who are oppressing those people have to bring with them a new morality in order to make them not do that. Now, this is what this is right here. Around this time, a lot of people were mad as fuck, and Jesus wasn't helping it. So what they decided to do was make up new spiritual systems in order to help the middle class stay a part of this country and want to be optimistic about all of the bad shit going on. After the 1920s took place, after the 1920s began, you've seen all of these movements that were very popular around the end of the 1800s. You saw them start going underground because of the judgment they were getting from other people back then. You can't go onto mainstream and just start spreading this stuff. So what did you start seeing? You start seeing that the most powerful people in society were giving the say so, or giving a go to the people who actually believed in this stuff to be on all of the mainstream outlets, like TV, radio, newspaper interviews. If you were seen as famous, that means you were believing in one of these outlets, especially in the 1920s. That way, you believe that since the masses are seeing this, and since somebody's being put in front of the masses and nobody else can complain about it, that this is the actual truth. You won't second guess it. And this is why they had to come with a second wave of these people's information being retaught 20 years later after it has been hidden for about 20 years, with new systems that can be brought to the masses and not just have this on a middle class level. And not only the middle class would be able to get this information and be able to use it. They are now packaging this into spiritual systems the same way that they did with Jesus and religion. So let's go ahead and get into that. When the 1920s started, you started seeing something rise up named Wicca. Wicca is actually an extension of a mix between Helena Blavatsky and Aleister Crowley. And these two systems put together make up Wicca, which is the antithesis or one of the main interest points into the New Age movements. And this is where they say, this is like when the 1920s start, that's where you start getting what they say conscious information is, all the conscious stuff. But then you go back a little bit further than that to the 1850s and look at all the spiritual systems made then. That's where you start seeing what they call the subconscious or the occult information is at, which is what they hide once again, because they want you to only go to the stuff that they made during the 1920s, because this is for the mundane people. This is for the poor class. This is for the middle class that really doesn't actually get the information. They just want to be a part of something. So they made up Wicca. This is pushed to the white communities mostly. And you have a couple of island type, you have a couple of island spiritual systems inside of Wicca, like voodoo and a couple of things like that, but they're not nearly as powerful as the original indigenous people doing that. And next you have something called the Oxford Group. The Oxford Group is responsible for literally every form of mind control that you know on this planet, because the Oxford Group is literally Ben Bernanke's and the people who, Edward Bernays and the people who started this propaganda machine that we use on TV and media. So that's why they are called the Oxford Group. And this group was started by Frank Buckman. You can go look that man up. He's very fucking sick. Noble Drew Ali, he started the Moorish Science Temple. Well, this was pushed to the black community as truth because he got most of his information from John Baloo Barrow. He got a little bit from the Edgar Casey, and he got a little bit from Helena Blavatsky and Rudolf Steiner too. He mixed that all together, put it in the bowl, and then he started pushing that to the black community, especially up north, and especially up north and the northeast. After that, you had Marcus Garvey and the Rastafari, or I don't know if he really started the Rastafari, but he was a part of the movement for the Rastafari. I know he had his own movement going, and I can't remember the name of it. I think it's called the UNFC or something like that. But it's basically Pan-Africanism. The idea of Pan-Africanism, a lot of people are not going to be able to understand this, is actually pushed as a result of secret societies and false information. Now, a lot of people are not going to understand this because they don't associate Marcus Garvey as having a spiritual system. But what we don't understand is that action, which is energy, is spiritual. That's all. I mean, energy and spirituality is the same. Energy and spirit is the same. So if somebody can use their energy to make you do something, they're going to have to use a system to do that. And the system that he was using is basically a mix of the Guavana list, which is Armenianism and is race dominant, manifest destiny based off of race. And he's also taking a little bit from Rudolf Steiner and anthroposophy. And he also mixed a lot of information with Sheikh Anta Diop. I'm not saying Sheikh Anta Diop was a bad person. I'm not even saying Marcus Garvey was a bad person. I don't know if he was aware of what he was doing, but I do know for a fact that most of the information came from Armenianism. He just reversed it from white people to black people. That's all he did. Next, you got Ernest Holmes, who made up what's called the religious science. The religious science is basically where you get stuff like historicity from, and you get stuff like the study of Kemet and the study of shit like that, going all the way back to that history, because these people are pushing the illusion that like I said, they're pushing the illusion that the stuff that we are learning in today's world that was really just rewritten information and an estimation of information brought by these people between the 1850s and the 1900s. He's just pushing that information onto you as if that this is to finalize in your mind that this came from ancient times and this has always been around and that we've just been hidden from this information and we got to start doing all this shit now back again before we die. And that's not true, because most of it's not lies, but most of it is mistruth. And what he talked with the religious science movement is that literally anything that you can prove in a way to be real, you should make a spirituality out of it, and it should be in line with everybody else's spirituality in a way. And this is where a lot of the euphemism was let in through this very movement itself. Then last but not least, you had Wallace Ford Muhammad and Elijah Muhammad with the Nation of Islam. And I don't even really have to go into that, because if I had to literally say it, I put him at the end of the list, because he stole from every last one of those authors I told you about that released that shit in the 1850s and 1900s, and he put it together for the black community. He did the same thing Noble Drew Ali did, but he did it on a much more complete field to take the person completely away from the reality they were in. Told them there was a spaceship coming and shit. He told them all this stuff. And now that you are seeing the religious movements that were 100% brought to popularity between the 1920s and the 1950s, and no time before that did it exist, that now these right here are being presented to us in the very moment, in this present, as if it is truth, and that it's been around since the beginning of time, and that everybody needs to respect this, and that these groups are 100% infallible. Stop. And this is a complete fallacy, basically. This is all a part of the New Age movement. It's all a part of the New World Order, and it is all a part of keeping your mind in shutdown mode where they're making all these changes around you. And you're supposed to now expect these changes. You are now expecting these changes to come to you, and you are not standing your ground on what you believe and what you know to be true. You are only accepting the very lies that were created for you in the 1850s through the 1900s for this very time, because you are under the illusion that just because you wake up every day and live today for today, and you don't know what's going to happen today in your life, that everybody does that. And that's not true. There's very focused people out there, organized people, and some of these people actually plan 50 years ahead of time. Some of these people actually plan 100 years ahead of time. And sometimes you don't even have to plan 100 years ahead of time to put something together that has been working for 100 years without everybody knowing it. Now, I want you to watch this video. I want you to stare at this chart. And I want you to see that. And I want you to connect that. Whatever spiritual movements that were created between the 1970s and the 2000s. What's that? What's up, Soulja? It's Mars here.
It's your boy Gnarly and this motherfucker.
And we're here to go ahead and go more in depth on revolutionary spirituality right now. I'm going to ask my brother a couple questions. You got so much information, but first, go ahead, goddamn. get your information, what you do, your Instagram, anything you want to, your number or whatever.
Yeah, I'm not gonna give y'all my number, but I'll give you my Instagram, RICH, period, like an actual period, BICK. Yeah, my name is Gnarly, and you know what I'm saying, I'm an entrepreneur, you know what I'm saying. I'm really just another branch of art from Soja Media. So yeah, if you ever get to meet me, which I hope you do, you can have long talks about things.
Hell yeah. More in depth. So basically, you already know, we're going in about how the spirituality of today's time and most of the information that we're given is actually recycled, regurgitated stuff, and that if you actually live in today, then you can create a difference for the future. Or you can just keep on recycling the same shit over, which you know is some bullshit. Right, bruh?
Right.
So shit, I mean, basically, I wanted to ask you straight up, because I already know you know a lot about this. With all of the different spiritualities that us, I mean, I don't want to single us out, but like African Americans in a way, all the options that we were given in spirituality, do you feel like, you know, looking at, you know, into all the different resources that we've been talking about, do you feel like any of them is actually giving you the full truth or like a good path to start on?
No, honestly, because I feel like that because like if it ain't 100% true, then it ain't right. You feel what I'm saying? So I mean, by me saying that, it's just like your whole life you will sit right here and believe something, and you'll believe that you're striving towards whatever your goal is. And in actuality, just to be finding out that you're actually going out in the opposite direction. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And for those that know and still just like, you know, hey, but I'm not one of those few. You know what I'm saying? We striving for the truth. So the major religions and things like that, man, they like, bro, it's just, man, it's so deceitful that it's not even fair. You know what I'm saying? It's taught to you from, like...
You used an analogy that I liked earlier, too, when we was talking. You said it's a double-edged sword, bro.
Yeah.
Go back. I mean, I want you to go back in on that. I was thinking...
About the phones?
I mean, no, you were saying, like, religion is a double-edged sword.
Oh.
And the phone, I mean, shit, that relates to everything else, too, but, you feel me? I want you to go in specifically about that
the
part.
Religion?
Or the spiritualities and the religion and shit, like...
Yeah, I mean, like, I said that probably because thinking back on that, I probably was like, I can have you thinking. I can have you, like, submissive in a way. You feel what I'm saying? To the point where I can do anything to you. Would you call that religion? Like if I bestow principles in you that made you like literally be a bitch, would you call that religion? Feel what I'm saying? Like if I literally like in a way, like, you know, you can look at those things and be like, oh, why not? You know what I'm saying? It's love. You feel what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? That's how everything's supposed to be. But to kind of piggyback off what my boy Mars talked about earlier before this video even got started, you know what I'm saying? Those are like how can you deny something that's natural? You feel what I'm saying? Like, if I punch him right now, I guarantee you, I won't be still. We not gonna be having this video. Y'all finna see a whole nother type of video.
Yeah.
You know what I'm
MMA
saying?
type shit.
Right. You feel me? So, like, how can you suppress that feeling? Basically, I'm telling you, suppress that. Fuck that. Yeah, you sit down.
Helicopter going over. That's how you. But yeah, what you're saying, bro.
But other people will look at that and be like, "Oh yeah, that's how we should be." You know what I'm saying? I say that's a double-edged sword because, like, I mean, bro, you control it. You mentally controlling. But then, like, once you see it, like, and it's not even only with that. That's just, like, the tip of the iceberg. Like, it's like, okay, with religion itself, speaking from my experience, like, I done been here, mentally, not physically. I done been, like, 1,000 places. Mentally, due to religion. Like, it's like a rabbit hole. Like, bro, I literally, like, oh yeah, I think this is it right here. Okay, get all the way down. Oh yeah, this is definitely not it. You know what I'm saying? And I did that like 1,000 times. You know what I'm saying? So, by me saying that, it's just like, why the it's the truth so hard to find. You know what I'm saying? But I could just, like, be deceived openly anywhere. You feel what I'm saying? On the TV screen, churches on TV. I can go to a church on a blog. I can do, like, and they claim to be what you need. Like, hey, we got a list of things for you to do. And if you do these things, if you do these things, you should be good, right? But how many of you have done that? How many of you have done that? Are you self-sufficient right now? Or are you still seeking? Are you still looking? But there you go. That was real in depth. I'm sorry.
Oh no, I ain't no apology. I appreciate that shit. I mean, the next question I was really just gonna ask. I mean, just building off what you were just saying, really. You know, we already know the truth, bro. You know, like I was saying earlier, like, it's just based blurred the words in a way. But it's to a point now where there's a lot of confusion going on, and they use the confusion to actually keep the power because they don't have no power. But how and what do you feel like, basically, it's the main thing that in spirituality we need to learn, bro? Like, as a group of people, if you could just tell a child something for the rest of their life, basically, like, what would be the actual good that you could put out there, you feel me?
Believe nothing. Seek your own truth. That's the only thing that I could tell you. Let me tell you why I say that. I'm still looking. Facts. That's all I gotta say.
Alright, next thing, I'm gonna just move on. Like, you know how we were just talking about religions and shit, basically being crazy and miscuring people. Did you know that there's a whole subculture based around people like Noble Drew Ali and the Nation of Islam and Rastafari and many other religions, basically, that are right now in our community being broken down and given to us, like, as African Americans and black people or Africans or whatever you want to call it, or Indians or Native Americans, whatever you consider yourself to be. They breaking that shit down and they give it to us, like, in today's world. They redition it out in today's world. So they doing that through a lot of the people who were going between 1920s and 1950s, basically. Like, the Wicca movement, you got a lot of people wanting to be witches and shit now. Why you think that? You remember Harry Potter and shit like that? All the witch movement, everybody seem like they want to be a witch in the world now. Well, not everybody, but a lot of people seem like they want to be perceived as witches. And
it was cool back then.
Yeah, and that's where that came from. It came from Gerald Gardner and Wicca. Then you got the Oxford group. Y'all ever heard of Oxford University?
Of course.
I ain't gotta say much after that. Moorish Science Temple, bro. This is one of the main ones, bro. Like, did you know that these people literally teach that they were here before everybody else?
Yeah, the Moors.
The Moors.
Yeah.
So, what do you think about that? I just want to get your opinion on that. Like, what do you think about the Moors and shit, like stuff like that?
Wow. At one point in time, because like I know a lot of people, and like I guess it's just a God-given gift that a lot of people, instead of a lot of negativity in my life, I really like receive a lot of positivity from everybody. It don't matter who you are, bro. You can be the biggest gangster out there, man. Come on. But talking to people, bro, on a different level other than like just associates, like talking on a deeper level with a lot of people, it gives me a lot of insight. And at one point in time, I thought that me joining the Moors or some shit like that, or fucking not the Illuminati, what's the other one?
Masons.
Yeah, some shit like that. You feel what I'm saying? Was a good idea as far as I'm like, okay, these niggas got the knowledge. You know what I'm saying? They know what's going on. You feel what I'm saying? But that was all I was seeking. You feel what I'm saying? I ain't know what I'll come with all that shit. But it's still, to speak back on the Moors, like it's still like deceiving in a way, because they basically, the bait is the truth. You feel what I'm saying? But when you know the truth, okay. What Spider-Man, that was his uncle?
Yeah.
His uncle, right? I said this earlier, if you on my Instagram, I said, he told him, he said, with great power comes great responsibility. You feel what I'm saying? What is power? Knowledge is power, boy. You feel what I'm saying? Come with great responsibility. You feel what I'm saying? And those people with the knowledge are like totally disregarding responsibility. They like, fuck responsibility. We want more power. We want more power. Any way possible. Greed, you know what I'm saying? They don't give a fuck. You know what I'm saying? So that's how I feel on no phone. Somebody might see the video. Hey, you know what? Try to come knock me out. Hey,
right. Ain't none of
fire your ass up.
Too many niggas out there know it now. Right. They can't single you out.
Oh yeah, they can't single me out good. I'm just letting y'all know for safety purposes.
Oh yeah, they already know we protected, bro. So yeah, appreciate that, man. Appreciate the build. Appreciate you coming through. You might be seeing Mike a lot on the channel facts. Because we already got the Soul Drop fam. Y'all might just send me so far, but just
hey, get what? I don't give a fuck.
Turn it up.
I don't give a fuck what nobody say, but hey, get what? You know how I got down. This ain't no gang. You know what I'm saying? This ain't no gang. But I'm just gonna use a gang as a like, you know how. Bro, I'm original. Do you understand this? I am original 100%. Soldier. Fuck wrong with you. Y'all understand that? And if you don't, then we'll make you understand in the videos.
There was a message in the chat room wanting me to ask Jordan about Helena Blavatsky and his opinion of her, knowing that he's read her work and he's endorsed her work in the past. But there's so much conspiracy out there about this isn't even his real name, that his real name is Russell Pine, and that he got the name Jordan Maxwell from Blavatsky's work. A character or emanation by the name of Jordanus Maximus out of one of her writings. And so he took that name from that. Is it true? Do not know. People claim that Jordan Maxwell is in the Illuminati, that he's out to spread false information, things like that. There's so many videos exposing him, and I think, quite frankly, Jordan Maxwell has seen a lot of this work, and he's grown tired of it. So when I asked him about Blavatsky, I asked him, I said he was a fan, basically saying, you're a fan of the work. And he didn't like when I put those words together. He didn't like me saying that he was a fan of Blavatsky. And he kind of blew up and kind of set the record straight a little bit. But I will say that Jordan Maxwell is from the Gulf Breeze / Pensacola, Florida area. And there are two roads that cross when you cross the roads, and you cross Jordan and Maxwell Street that cross. I thought that was interesting, being in the city that he's from. I asked him about that in a private meeting I had with him, and he didn't really go into much detail about it. But anyway, check this clip out. So we have some questions coming through in the chat room, and I want to make sure I ask some of these. Some fans are here, and they want to know your opinion of Blavatsky, because they know you're a fan of her work. And what does her work mean to you?
I'm not a fan of Blavatsky, but when I am in front of an audience and somebody brings her up, intellectually, I know who she is. I've read her work, and so I am bright enough to understand what she was saying, where she was from, her culture, and what she was doing. Nobody said I loved her and I was following her, but I'm not stupid. I know exactly what she was doing. I know precisely what she was saying, and I understand it. And so I'm just trying to be honest. Well, the last time anybody was honest, they got nailed to a cross. So when I hear the word Blavatsky, I first of all understand she was not stupid. The scripture says that the demonic world, there's a scripture very pertinent that says the sons of this world or the sons of this world system are wiser than the children of light. Meaning, the people who run this planet are far, far smarter than you will ever be. So if you think you're going to do battle with the Prince of Darkness, you better go back and do your homework, because you don't have what it takes. You're not smart enough to deal with the powers of darkness.
Well,
the Pope in Rome
how do we do that,
is
though,
not
Jordan?
smart enough.
Like, if we can't do it on our own strength, how do we deal? How
Not
do we
at
deal?
all.
Not at all.
The very word faith today, if you understand the word faith, and Christians do not, they have never understood the word faith. Today, Christianity talks about faith. I like what Rodney Dangerfield said about faith. He said, faith is that wonderful quality. These are not my words. This is Rodney Dangerfield said many years ago. Faith is that wonderful quality that allows you to believe something that you know is bullshit. So when you talk about faith, faith is the word faith is actually translated credulity, credulous, meaning that you believe something. That's why if you go to a new church, the Christians in that church will say, "Are you a believer?" And we have books in Christianity talk about the believer's house of faith and the believer's book of faith. Believer means you don't know anything. You're ignorant, ill-informed, unread, and downright stupid. And that's why you're crawling on your knees trying to stay alive and are being laughed at, mocked by the Illuminati masters of this world, who are laughing at you and mocking you and placing you in a position of slavery. Why? Because you're stupid. You're ignorant, ill-informed, and you love the lies. You love the lies, the sex, the entertainment, the beer. You love your sports. You love the world. And yet Jesus, the scripture said, the world was not worthy of him. So when you are interested in talking about Blavatsky, then you better know who she was and what she was doing. So my position on Blavatsky is very clear. I'm not a follower of Blavatsky, but I'm intellectually aware that when somebody is saying something, I don't care who they are, if it's the truth, and I know it's the truth because I've already proved it, and I see it as truth, I give them their due.
Yeah.
Blavatsky said many things which were absolutely flawlessly true. It doesn't mean she loved she loved God, and she was holy and righteous. No, nobody said that. I just said there are certain things she said which are true. And intellectually, I understand what she was saying because I've read her work. But you give me any damn name, I am intellectually interested to know what people are doing. I want to know what they have said. I want to know who's financing them. I want to know where they've come from. I want to know. And the only way you're going to learn anything is if you stop, what's the word, pontificating, because, I think it was Isaac Asimov said, Plato. It was Plato who said, I can understand when a child is afraid of the dark. What I can't understand are adults who are afraid of the light. And that's why today I understand what Blavatsky was saying, and many things she said were true. It doesn't mean she was from God. It doesn't mean she was holy. And it doesn't mean I'm following her. But intellectually, I've read her, and a lot of things she said were true. So if you want to talk about Blavatsky, let's talk about Blavatsky, what she said, and what was absolutely true. So I am not a follower of Blavatsky. I'm not a follower of anybody in this world. But I do admit when I see something which is true and someone says then it was true, then I don't mind admitting it. I'm free and open. Know the truth and it will set you free. So I'm not afraid of offending God. I'm afraid of being stupid and religious and bigoted and ill-informed. Because why? Because propaganda does not deceive you. Propaganda helps you to deceive yourself.
If you enjoyed listening to this podcast segment, be sure to listen to the entire episode by clicking the video to your right. Also, we are on iTunes. You can download the MP3 versions as well. Be sure to subscribe for future episodes.
Is the New Age movement a front for a one-world religion? Having now made several videos for my Agenda Explained series, it's time to delve into the religious side of the push for a one-world government. At its simplest, the wider agenda described in this series can be broken down into politics, economics and religion. It's the latter that I haven't covered as yet, and this video will be the first time this is addressed. I say first time because it will not be the last, as even the New Age agenda is a front for something bigger. But to understand what this is, we must first understand the New Age agenda. Before I continue, as usual, I will remind people that this series isn't the place to get detailed evidence and sources. Instead, it's a primer and summary for a complex agenda that attacks every part of human life. I've already described how an agenda increasingly referred to as globalism is pushed via postmodernism. This serves two purposes. First, it provides a secular, irreligious way to indoctrinate those that consider themselves rational or atheistic. Second, it breaks down any objective understanding of reality and morality, therefore making it easier to brainwash people. For those that don't know, brainwashing is most effective when you make someone doubt reality so much that they no longer trust their own minds. The more doubt you create, the easier it is to turn someone into whatever you want them to be and to make them do whatever you want. The New Age movement is the substitute for postmodernism that caters to those that want a spiritual or religious path. While the New Age movement has nothing in common with the secular side of postmodernism, it has everything in common with postmodernism in an epistemological or moral sense. In other words, like postmodernism, the New Age movement pushes relativism, where there's no absolute truth. Robert Mueller, former Assistant Secretary General of the United Nations, creator of a World Core Curriculum, and winner of the 1989 UNESCO Prize for Peace Education, summed up the New Age agenda when he said, quote, "We must move as quickly as possible to a one-world government, a one-world religion, under a one-world leader," unquote. Mueller was pivotal in pushing New Age spirituality within the United Nations, and his life's work demonstrates that, in spite of what some might say, globalism is much more than a political or economic ideology. So how exactly does the New Age agenda promote a one-world religion? With such a variety of religions, sects, denominations, and spiritual beliefs in the world, have you ever thought that either they're all false, all or many have some elements of truth, or only one can be truly correct? With this conundrum in mind, it's impossible to create a one-world religion without alienating some or most other religions on some level, unless, that is, you redefine the nature of truth. This is where the New Age movement becomes just like any other authoritarian or totalitarian agenda, where the individual must be brainwashed to the point that you can make them believe anything is true, just like postmodernism does. In the case of the New Age movement, each person's truth is as valid as everyone else's, because we're all having subjective experiences that interpret reality in different ways. I'm fully aware that this is exactly the same as any other relativist mumbo-jumbo, although the New Age movement repackages this as spirituality, therefore appealing to those that want to pursue a spiritual path, as I've already pointed out. In the New Age movement, no one can ever say what's true or false, including anything relating to spirituality or religion. By shutting down questions about absolute truth, the New Age movement creates a hybrid interpretation of every religion and spiritual belief in the world by cherry-picking elements from all of them. This is done under the guise of unity and tolerance, although it's anything but in practice. In reality, being told that you're not allowed to make a statement of truth is very dangerous indeed. Without the freedom to do this, a deep level of ignorance, stupor, and laziness turns people into mindless slaves acting on pure emotion. Have you ever wondered why people that buy into New Age concepts of spirituality are so hostile and dogmatic, despite claiming to be tolerant? It's because these people are so brainwashed into hating the idea of absolute truth that they'll turn on you for challenging their subjective worldview. When the time comes, these people would be willing to sacrifice you like a lamb to a pagan god, because your refusal to conform to a world of no truth makes you unworthy of being treated like a human being. So how does the New Age agenda infect other religions with relativist brainwashing? This started in the hippie movement of the 1960s, which was primarily based around Eastern mysticism, the occult, and paganism. It initially railed heavily against Christian morality, but it was only a matter of time before Christianity itself would have to be integrated into an emerging one-world religion. New Agers therefore began to infiltrate Christian churches, infecting them with New Age spirituality. This was achieved by getting rid of any sense of personal responsibility or justice, replacing this with nothing but emotional appeals to love and compassion, in the same vein as the 1960s counterculture that gave birth to the New Age movement. It led to a movement within Christianity called the emerging or emergent church. Some also call this postmodern Christianity, further highlighting the connection between postmodernism and the New Age movement. This subversion of Christianity was spearheaded by postmodern gurus like Brian McLaren and Rob Bell. Rob Bell epitomizing this New Age relativism when he argues in his book Love Wins that everyone gets to heaven irrespective of religious beliefs. In the same decade as the counterculture of the 1960s that spawned the postmodern church, the Second Vatican Council took place. Some wonder how we can suddenly arrive at a point where Pope Francis diverges so much from traditional biblical scripture, but it began decades ago with the Second Vatican Council, often referred to simply as Vatican II. Over time, it led to a gradual abandonment of orthodox traditions and teachings within Catholicism under the guise of modernization. Typically, subverters claimed this would lead to increased support for the Catholic Church, when this has actually done the opposite by alienating traditional Catholics. What's more, Vatican II, like postmodern Christianity, has aimed to bring together many religious and spiritual faiths under the banner of interfaith tolerance and understanding. Within the dialogues between different religious and spiritual beliefs, there's no room for statements of absolute truth, as this would cause offense or invalidate certain beliefs. This explains why, on a local and national level, Christian churches increasingly marginalize any attempt to make objective statements about what Christianity stands for, particularly if this contradicts political correctness. On an international level, different religions and faiths are brought together to promote unity, although this is a front for slowly moving towards a one-world religion. In Christianity, ecumenism and a World Council of Churches has attempted to break down boundaries between different Christian denominations. But increasingly, this is transforming into an interfaith agenda that promotes organizations such as the World Council of Religious Leaders and a Parliament of the World's Religions, with annual summits taking place. This alienates anyone that doesn't conform to tight controls of religious expression, while attempting to gradually marry all spiritual and religious beliefs together by merging them with a New Age interpretation of truth. Since we already have a council and parliament for the world's religions, the foundational infrastructure for a one-world religion is already in place. Some may argue that these organizations are currently independent. However, anyone familiar with mission creep is more than aware that if it's possible for an organization to morph into something sinister, unless appropriate measures are taken, it inevitably will. This is Rocking Mystery, over and out.
Thank you for sticking around to learn about the revolution of spirituality with us. I'm going to share with you pictures of and a little bit of information about the people that I mentioned between the 1850s and the 1920s so that you could do more refined research. And I'm going to put a couple of videos on here in order to help you solidify what you've learned today. Thank you for your time.